All right. Well, welcome everybody to the second day of the From Conference. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Rachel Kane. Rachel Kane is a licensed clinical psychologist who has worked at APUS since 2006. She began as part-time faculty, transitioning to full-time faculty in 2009, and subsequently to program director for psychology in 2019 and assistant chair for psychology in 2021. She completed her bachelor's in psychology from Davidson College in 1992 and her master's and PhD in clinical child psychology from the University of Alabama in 1994 and 1999, respectively. Dr. Kane has maintained a part-time private practice in clinical psychology since 2000 and continues to provide psychoeducational assessments for children and adolescents for various issues, including ADHD, learning differences and disorders, and various emotional and behavioral issues. Dr. Kane has also had experience with the foster care system through her therapy practice and has viewed firsthand the challenges that these children and young people face due to societal issues and problems. This is a topic that has concerned her deeply over her years in practice. So, welcome to Forgotten and Marginalized: Aging Out of the Foster Care.
Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are all having a great day. As I'm talking to you, I am looking across my house and I see that my dog is up looking at the window right now. So if you start hearing any barking, I apologize. It's my German Shepherd and she feels the need to protect us 24/7 from scary things like deer or squirrels. So if you hear racket, I apologize in advance. So today I'm going to be talking with you guys about a topic that doesn't really get a lot of attention, and it's the complex challenges that are faced by young adults who age out of the foster care system in the US. So it depends upon the state, but this can occur either at age 18 or in some states at age 21. Now, just because, these kids and these young adults age out of the system, let me go forward here. Hang on one second. I'm going to go forward to the next slide. Yeah. Just because these kids age out of the system doesn't really mean that they're necessarily ready for the adult world. They don't have a lot of preparation. Keep in mind the reason why these folks are in foster care in the first place is because there's something that's not right with their family of origin, generally speaking. So most of these young adults do not have much in the way of family support, and they don't really have people there to support them during this transitional period. Because of that, a lot of them face some really pretty serious repercussions in, lots of different domains of their life, actually, including housing, employment, healthcare, and education. So, there are plenty of resources out there that discuss these challenges. However, something that I found while I was researching this topic is it's pretty rare to actually hear from these youth directly. And the reason for that in the popular media is because a lot of times the courts are very reluctant to give wards of the state permission to speak to media. So something I'm going to show you guys just here at the beginning of this presentation is a brief video from a local news channel in Southern California. And what's happening here is there is someone who's a filmmaker. His name is Sean Kadlick, and he actually was able to obtain permission from the court in California to interview several adolescents who are navigating their way through the foster care system and also speak with them after they aged out. This film is called Possible Selves. It's actually very, very good. If you have the opportunity after this presentation and you would like to go and watch it, it's easily available on the internet. You can find it without a problem. I really do recommend it. You'll see how precarious life is for teens in the foster care system. One topic that it shows very clearly, I think, is that foster parents tend to be less understanding of, acting out behaviors and attachment issues in adolescents or teens as opposed to younger children or babies. So teens tend to be moved around a lot from placement to placement. And you're going to see that with Alex, who is the young man that's going to be interviewed in this news clip. So this is about a 5-minute clip, and I'm going to bring it up and let you guys watch this. It's not super lengthy, but I really kind of felt like it was important for you to hear some of these problems I'm going to be talking about from a firsthand point of view. So just bear with me for 1 second while I pull this up. And if they show an ad first, I'm sorry. I hope they won't. We'll see. Let me know if you have problems seeing
milk
this.
and almond milk, which should I drink?
Neither.
There's the ad. Hang on 1 second. We'll skip it. Here we go.
Siblings were in foster care. I'm a second generation foster kid.
It's a struggle thousands of kids deal with every year, having their lives torn between their biological and foster families. That clip we just showed is from a documentary called Possible Selves. It follows two teens as they try to navigate their lives in foster care, and May happens to be Foster Care Awareness Month. So this morning we are joined by Alex Ballantyne, who is featured in the film, and Sean Cadillac, who produced and directed it. Thank you both so much for being here. This is really amazing.
Thanks so much.
And we were just talking about the access you got to make this film, because it's very rare to actually have people in the system be able to publicly talk about what they're going through.
It is, yeah. You have to, because young people in foster care their guardians are the state. You have to get permission from the court, and through the nonprofit First Star that Alex was in when he was when he was 14 years old. We were able to get permission to immerse ourselves in the lives of young people experiencing the child welfare system.
It is so important to hear it from your perspective, Alex, and it was very brave of you to share your story. I'm sure it's not easy to be, under the microscope in that way, but tell us a little bit about what you went through.
So foster care for me was very interesting. I started off in a emergency shelter when I was 12. From there, I had a group home, and then I had the foster family, my first foster family, for 2 years. From there, I kind of bounced around a little bit, more emergency shelters, group homes. I ended up with legal guardians, and then at 18, unfortunately, I was homeless. Homeless for a few months, and then went through transitional housing up until I was 21. And then after that, did a little bit of transitional housing plus, which is up to 24. But I aged out of that when I was 22.
I mean, that's a huge issue we hear about a lot, right? Is the aging out of foster care. All of a sudden you turn 18 and there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, so unfortunately, my social worker was a social worker intended for very young children. She didn't have any other teens my age. So she didn't really have a clear, grasp on the resources that were really offered to me. The documentary shows, I was homeless for the first few months before getting into that transitional housing program, which I think could have been avoided had I had, the right social worker.
Well, I just have to say, you're so impressive. I know you have your eyes set on going to Berkeley to get your master's degree. It's really impressive how you've accomplished all you've accomplished. And for you, why was it so important to do a documentary on this very sensitive topic?
Yeah, well, these are stories that we almost never hear. And there are almost 400,000 young people in foster care right now. It's a huge percentage of our population. And in order to thrive, we need to know about them, and we need to be able to meet them and support them and bring our hearts to them and connect with them.
And there's sometimes a stigma. You guys talked about that in your email about, people who are maybe reluctant to help or to take them in. And the statistics are really sad. I mean, when it comes to graduation, incarceration, employment opportunities, it's really sad.
Yeah, I mean, right now, only 60% of foster youth graduate college or graduate high school in the state of California, and 1 in 4 will be either incarcerated or homeless or both by the time they turn 25. So it's a challenging situation.
Yeah, well, it's so important we see stories like yours to give people hope, and also to open up the possibilities for people who do have, these stigmas.
Yeah, I agree. I think, a lot of people have choices to make in their life, and you can choose your path no matter what. And I think that's what I've believed in. Sean's known me for the last 10 years now, and I think that's always been my attitude, is that I can choose what path I take, and I can choose my outcomes.
Well, I'm so awed by you. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see the film. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for more information about the documentary, check out our website, kcalnews.com, and click.
Okay. Let me get out of that and back to where we were. Okay. Okay, so you kind of get a brief idea there of what life is like in foster care. And he highlights some of the things I'm going to be talking about here momentarily. So, let's talk about the scope of the problem and some statistics. I mean, the first thing you're going to see is that statistics obviously vary and estimates vary. And I found a source that I found very helpful called the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And there's all sorts of stuff on there about foster care. So that's where my statistics are coming from. One good piece of news is that the overall number of children in foster care does seem to be dropping in recent years. So the estimates now, he said 400,000 in that video, but there are estimates that are even a little bit lower than that. So there are fewer children and adolescents in foster care in recent years, and especially since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. But on the other hand, statistics also show that the system is actually finding fewer permanent families for young people. So, in other words, there's a higher proportion of adolescents who remain in the system until they reach the age of majority. So, that's not a good thing. Fewer than half of those adolescents actually leave foster care to live with adoptive families or to reunite with their birth families. So, that's, a pretty significant issue. So the number I really want to stick in your head right now is that approximately 20,000 youth age out of foster care each year in the US. 20,000 sounds like kind of a big number, but when you think about the population of the US, that's really not a huge number. So my point, you're going to hear this several times, is we can do better for these 20,000 youth. So let me just keep going and we'll get back to that. Okay. So some of the challenges that are faced by foster care alumni, they tend to fall in several categories. So the first one would be housing instability. That was referred to in the video just momentarily, a few moments ago. Medical care and mental health issues, and then also unemployment and financial security. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth about each of those. So as far as housing instability, he referred to this in the video, and I find this kind of shocking. Upon aging out, about 20% of former foster youth are instantly homeless, like, wow, or without a place to go, and 50% will experience homelessness within the next 4 years. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're like living on the streets, okay? But it could be that they're couch surfing, bouncing around from place to place, living temporarily with friends, but they don't actually have a place to, hang their hat and call their own. So this is a very, very common issue. Affordable housing options are really pretty limited. And of course, these teens or young adults have lack of a rental history, or they usually don't have a cosigner and that might disqualify them. They may not have a credit history, they've never had a credit card before. In addition to a lack of formal education, these foster youth are often, limited in terms of financial literacy. Very few of them have a good or adequate understanding of budgeting, how to save, how to manage debt. They just haven't been taught, and they've never really had most have never really had a great role model to teach them these things, or a mentor. Okay, there's something called the Casey Initiative as well. And according to them, fewer than 50% of youth aging out of foster care receive any kind of financial literacy training. So, what happens is many of them wind up falling into debt, into poverty early on in their adulthood years. And that makes long-term financial stability much more difficult to achieve. And we kind of fall into a pattern, right? Also, this was mentioned in the video as well. 1 in 5 foster care alumni are actually incarcerated between the ages of 17 and 21. Wow. I think it's huge. It's really big, and that's a major problem. All right, the next big category has to do with medical care and mental health issues. Okay, so the way that this works, it depends on the state. But children in foster care are provided with healthcare coverage, including mental health services, but that varies depending on the state until they age out. Now, however, once they achieve whatever the maximum age is where they're covered, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, then they're on their own. So it's just like, boom, you're done. This support disappears. It leaves many without any healthcare coverage and really no affordable way to access it. Now, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as some people call it, has a provision in it to make former foster youth eligible for Medicaid up until age 26. Now, but not all states have actually accessed that and used it to the fullest degree. And also, here's another thing that's just kind of sad and shocking to me is that most of these youth are not actually educated that they have this coverage. And there's paperwork and stuff they have to do to make it happen. And most of them don't even know about it. So a lot of them don't use it and don't know about it. And so once they age out, they're done. They don't have anything, which is just really sad. Now, according to a study that was carried out by Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, only 43% of these youth aged out of foster care were enrolled in Medicaid 2 years after exiting the system. So, 57% are not. That's a lot. These gaps in coverage are really pretty concerning, especially given the rate of mental health issues in these former foster youth. Now, we've known, for a very long time that they tend to experience mental health crises and issues more frequently than their peers, same age peers that are not in foster care. 60 to 80% of foster youth carry some kind of mental health diagnosis. Some of the most common ones would include depression, anxiety, PTSD, and that could be either from the abuse or neglect they experienced that put them in foster care in the first place, or from the care itself, which is also sad and scary. There's also a high degree of children that are diagnosed with either conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder and reactive attachment disorder, which is a major issue in this population. A study from the National Foster Youth Institute found that 1 in 4 foster care alumni qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD. That's 25%. And that's a rate that's almost twice as high as our US war veterans. So it's a major, major issue. And this is another reason why a lot of these teens move around from placement to placement, because their mental health challenges are usually pretty severe. And foster parents don't receive a lot of great training on how to manage these types of issues. Even the ones that are considered therapeutic foster care that have more training, with a teen, the tolerance level for acting out is, like I said earlier, usually a lot lower. And these foster parents might say, we can't handle this kid and you need to move him. And sometimes on very, very short notice. Okay. Occupational and educational challenges. So here comes some more sad and scary statistics. You heard some of this in the video. Only about 50 to 60% of foster youth graduate from high school. Compare that to the national average of 85%. That's a big, significant difference. This, of course, can limit their employment possibilities. Now, here's another one that just blew my mind, honestly. Only 3%, earn college degrees by age 25, while approximately 85% do express the desire to attend college. But a lot of times what happens is they don't have the ability to pay the tuition, and they also don't have the knowledge they need to navigate the whole financial aid system. I can tell you from experience, because I have a college freshman this year, we just did this. Filling out that FAFSA application is not easy. Imagine being, 18 years old with no family support, trying to figure out how to fill that thing out. It is not easy. And most of the time, there's no one to help them. So in addition to that, even if they do manage to get financial aid, it often does not cover things like housing and food. And so these students wind up having to work outside jobs, which of course takes away from their ability to study. And a lot of times they wind up having to leave before they graduate, which is, sad and contributes to these statistics that we saw. Okay. So there's also limited job training resources available to these youth. Only about 50% of foster care alumni are employed by the age of 24 years old. That's not great. And that's as compared to 75% of their same age peers who have not gone through foster care. And those who actually do find work, the work that they find is not always great work. It's low paying, no benefits, little opportunity to advance. So a lot of times they wind up leaving their jobs, being fired, etc. Okay, another issue for these youth, and I'm going to talk about these challenges first, but then we're going to talk about what we can do about it, just so you know. Social and emotional isolation. It's really important for us to recognize that in addition to all the challenges I've talked about so far, there's a lot of emotional repercussions of having grown up in foster care and not having that family to fall back on. So that lack of a support network, the absence of a permanent family structure, a place to go for the holidays, those kinds of things can leave these former foster children feeling really, really isolated and marginalized, which is the topic of this conference. So, these folks really fit the mold of what we're looking to discuss. The social isolation that they experience can really exacerbate those feelings of abandonment that a lot of foster kids have. That's something that's very hard to overcome. Even if they went into foster care very early in their life, they still often feel abandoned. And because many of them have had numerous placements, they feel abandoned over and over and over again. And of course, this can worsen their mental health struggles. So there was a study or a report done by the National Youth and Transition Database, and they found that over 50% of youth aging out of foster care do experience chronic loneliness and feelings of disconnection from their communities. Okay, so we've outlined some of the problems. So what are some possible solutions? Now, I don't want you guys to think that I came up with all of these on my own. I did not. Okay, I cannot take credit for this, but I tried to pick out some of the ones that I think are doable and that would really, really benefit this group of young adults. So these are some possible reforms and policy changes. I'm just going to list them here and then I'll talk about each one a little bit. Extend the age at which youth age out of foster care. Widen access to affordable housing. Financial literacy and job training programs. Expanding Medicaid and mental health. Higher ed support programs. And also case management services after they age out. So let's dig a little bit deeper in each of these. So extending the age. Now, we talked about this a minute ago. So it used to be it was always 18. Once you turn 18, you're an adult. Boom, that's it. Some states have already extended care to age 21, that's a good start. However, many of these youth, even if they're 21 years old, I can tell you I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. She just turned 21 like 3 weeks ago. And the thought of her having, just been kicked out and told, all right, good luck. It's a little terrifying because there's a lot of stuff she doesn't know, even at age 21. So many of these youth, especially those without the kind of training and preparation they need, are still unprepared for all these challenges. So one remedy that's been suggested in some of the literature and the research that I've done suggest extending the age for foster care and financial support out to age 25. This would allow these youth a chance to complete their education, to complete college, for example. It would also allow them to find stable employment in a place, a secure place to live independently before that financial support is cut off. And there has been some research actually showing that extending the age even to 21 has reduced rates of homelessness and unemployment, which is great. Okay. The next suggestion is to widen access to affordable housing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, but just know I'm going to come back to it. One possible suggestion would be to give these youth who are aging out housing vouchers. In this sense, the federal government would then provide some dedicated funding for affordable and safe housing. Now, there are some of these already, and I'm going to go back and talk about it in a minute, but there's problems with them. So there's the Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act. That's a mouthful. That actually does provide some transitional housing support, but there's more needed for the 20,000 per year that we talked about earlier. We also need to do something to incentivize landlords to, rent to these youth. I think probably a lot of them are scared to do that. They may think that these are going to be people who are going to trash their apartments and all sorts of things like this. So we need to figure out some ways to incentivize apartment places and stuff like that to rent out to these youth. Okay, as far as expanding Medicaid coverage and mental health support, I talked about the ACA extending out to age 26, but it's not currently enacted in all states, only some. Some states opt out. Why that's allowed, I can't explain all the politics of it, but that's the case. So there really should be some deliberate efforts to ensure that all youth aging out of foster care are aware that they have this access, because like I said earlier, a lot of them don't even know. And really, there should be no additional paperwork or red tape that they have to go through to access this extended Medicaid coverage. It should be an automatic thing. Mental health coverage. Now, here's a pet topic of mine. Should be expanded for these youth because I did, psychotherapy with kids for many years. I'm not doing it anymore for a variety of reasons. But back in the day when I was accepting Medicaid, I can tell you that what they do, they cover it, but they restrict it. So you get something like 26 sessions a year. So that's like every other week, which, is fine for some people and fine for some kids, but some kids need way more than that. The other problem is that the reimbursement rate for the provider is very, very low. So a lot of times the providers that are available who accept Medicaid are either those that are new to practice, um, those that are able for whatever reason to offer more, but for a lot of folks we're barely making our overhead, so you can't see too many Medicaid patients or else you're not going to be able to pay your rent, pay your staff, and so forth. So really there needs to be some initiative to incentivize providers to participate in network for Medicaid to see some of these kids. That's a pet thing of mine. I freely admit that I'm biased on that account, but I think it's important. Higher education support programs. So really, states should provide tuition waivers and or scholarships for these former foster youth at public universities and community college. And there is a little bit of this, but usually they're fairly small, $2,000, $5,000. It's not nearly enough to cover full tuition. And like you can see here, few of them cover the room and board side either. So the students are still on their own to figure out how to pay for that. And that usually requires them to have additional jobs. And these former foster youth really should be paired with some kind of a financial advisor or counselor to help them do all the paperwork that they need to do to get these, to know about, find, fill out the paperwork, do what they need to do to get these scholarships and grants and things that are out there. A lot of them just sit unused, which is really sad because the people who need them may not even know about them. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is case management services after aging out. And you're going to hear something in a minute that comes back to this. So once the youth age out of the system, they lose access to their social workers, to their case managers, to anybody who's been helping them along the way. And I'm talking about like not a gradual phase out. I'm talking about boom, see ya. And don't call me again. I'm not going to answer your calls kind of thing. So they're just basically kicked out of the nest. And so, there are suggestions that states should mandate extending those case management services for at least 5 years after the youth age out of the system. Let them get settled, get acclimated before you just completely rip out the rug from underneath them. Because these case managers can help with a lot of the problems that we've already talked about and provide support. Okay, I'm going to briefly run through a couple of successful programs, and there's lots more than this. I don't want to make it sound like there's only a few. So California actually has enacted a law that does allow foster care to be extended to age 21. Now, For that to work, though, they actually do have to meet certain criteria. They need to be continuing their education, working, or participating in some kind of training program. So they need to be working toward their own independence in order to qualify. And the research is finding that these youth, as compared to those who were basically aged out at 18, they're twice as likely to be working or enrolled in school and less likely to be homeless. So that seems successful. There's another program called LifeSet that's in several states. It's a transitional program designed to help these youth develop life skills, continue their education, find employment. They're paired with a mentor who meets with them weekly, which is great and helps them set goals. These participants were found to be 22% more likely to be employed, and 25% were more likely to have housing stability, as opposed to those who didn't receive those services. They also showed improvements in their mental health, and they were more likely to achieve their educational goals. So that's a very good thing. Okay, this next one, I'm going to kind of spend a little bit more time on. I'm just watching the time to make sure I don't go too far off topic here. Foster Youth to Independence Housing Vouchers, FYI. This is something that was launched by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And these are unique because the housing authorities can use them flexibly. So they're going to help these foster youth who may not otherwise qualify for housing assistance. So this sounds great, right? Sounds terrific. Well, strangely enough, while I was researching for this presentation, I was watching the local news one day here in Atlanta, Georgia, and there was a story on about this young woman who aged out of foster care and about this very FYI program. So I thought, isn't that interesting? So I'm going to just share with you a couple highlights and just to kind of show you how everything gets so screwed up with these poor foster youth, these former foster youth. So I'm talking specifically about Georgia here, but please understand that this is not a Georgia problem. Stuff like this is happening all over the US. So what I found is that there's more than 600 young adults between 18 and 21 aging out of foster care in Georgia every year, okay? And basically the agency, the welfare agency here in Georgia is called Department of Family and Children's Services, or DFACS. So DFACS, guess what? After they age out, they don't track them anymore. You're out of our system. We don't know where you are. We don't know how to find you. We can't, ask you questions. You're just gone. So this FYI program is a thing in Georgia. The program's vouchers provide up to 36 months of financial housing assistance to these young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 who've left foster care or will leave foster care in the next 90 days. Terrific. HUD actually announced in April of 2024 that there was nearly $13 million available to housing authorities in the US for this program. Awesome. Well, this year, Georgia, in particular, is eligible to receive a combined 769 FYI vouchers. That's a lot. But according to the data that they've collected, anybody care to guess how many have actually been obtained out of 769? Three. Not 30, not 300, three. Yeah, by only 2 housing authorities in the state, which are in smaller cities even. It's not Atlanta. So this means that Georgia has only tapped into 0.005% of the $12 million plus that's available from the federal government. Why, you ask? Well, so did I. Let me explain. So they're following one particular young woman in this story, and she was told on her 21st birthday, after she'd been in transitional housing for a while, she's on her own. She said no one from DFACS ever set a meeting with her to discuss the resources that are available or her plans for the future. She says one lady called her one time and that was it. And she finds herself in the situation that I described, where she wishes she could go to college. She would like to study film editing, but she can't afford it. I have to pick and choose, she said, and right now a place to live is more important than school, unfortunately. She's riding a bus and her skateboard back and forth to work, and she still has an eviction notice on her apartment right now. She would have been a prime candidate for this program, but she didn't know about it. She's received nothing from the state. No help, no guidance, no, hey, you're eligible for this, nothing. Okay, so the investigative reporter for this local station looked into this some more and asked around in the various counties, like, hey, why aren't you doing this? And one of the big counties in Atlanta, DeKalb County, said that its current utilization rate makes it ineligible. To apply for FYI vouchers, HUD requires a housing authority to actively use at least 90% of the Family Unification Program vouchers in its possession, which it currently did not qualify for. According to HUD, 13 housing authorities in Georgia could qualify, but some of them just elect not to for whatever unknown reason. So leaders from nearly all of the eligible housing authorities in Georgia, they told the reporter that their agencies hadn't heard from the state welfare agency about the program at all until August 1st, 2024, which coincidentally is the same day that this news channel investigators actually first reached out. Now, here's the other problem. HUD requires DFACS, the Department of Family and Children's Services, to provide a list of eligible youth to interested local housing authorities. However, DFACS said they don't have such a list since they don't track these youth after they age out. Okay, so major disconnect. Then this story, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds here, but I just want one other important thing. There are lots of like nonprofits that are working with these former foster youth who are like, hey, ask us. We've got the list. We know who they are. We can give you the info. But basically the housing authorities are not taking the initiative to do that. So there's a complete breakdown. And people like this young woman that I talked about are, she's essentially on the verge of eviction. She says she isn't confident she'll ever be connected to a voucher. I've come to peace with being by myself because I've been by myself my whole life. But I really do want to help other people who are in the same situation I'm in. If we want this nation to be any better than it is, we need to start with the young people because we are the future. And the story ends with this young woman has put herself together a GoFundMe for her own housing. So all of that just kind of demonstrates in real terms what some of these problems are, what the disconnects are. And I find it tragic. A couple other programs that have been successful, the Foster Care to Success National Scholarship Program. So there's lots of scholarships available. And then the last one really is Santa Clara, California instituted the Basic Income Pilot Program for foster youth. They launched a universal basic income plan that gives participants $1,000 a month for 2 years to help cover their living expenses and so that they can focus on their education and their job training instead of having to worry about where they're going to live. So that's kind of a neat thing too. So conclusion, and then I want to take your questions. Honestly, let's look at this. 20,000 youth aging out of foster care a year in the United States. Now, I recognize that states are not equal. There would not be as many students or foster youth in Alaska as in California, okay? But for the sake of argument, let's just say that each state will have roughly 400 of these youth each year. We could fit all of them easily in an NFL stadium, easily, and have lots of room left over. So why is it so difficult for us to take care of these 20,000 youth? They're in foster care due to no fault of their own. This is a situation they were probably born into. It only benefits society to help these folks succeed. It's also going to reduce the financial burden on society because, the studies do show that this is often tends to be generational. A mother who was in foster care often has a child who winds up in foster care and a father. So we can all really do our part to break this cycle and help these youth overcome these difficulties and build a successful and stable future. And I honestly just don't understand why we're not doing better. I think we can do better and we need to do better. So that is my conclusion. I see we've got a few minutes left for questions. I have not seen what's in the chat, so feel free to inform me.
All right. A lot of great comments about people being cut off Let's see. Let me grab a couple. Jackie Fowler said the immediate cutting off of social workers and tracking may be due to a lack of financial commitment and human resources. Do you think this is because these kids do not have the political power to make a difference?
I mean, another issue that, oh, sorry, there goes the dog. Another issue I didn't even get into is the turnover at DFACS. These caseworkers are paid peanuts, like nothing. I'm talking $25,000 a year, stuff like that. And it's an incredibly stressful job. They're overburdened and they just do not have the time that they need to spend with these youth. And like was mentioned in the video, a lot of them are very geared toward the younger kids and they don't know how to handle the teens. So there's just a confluence of problems, societal problems that are going on here.
We have a few more questions. Well, before we started, Rachel and I had a slight chat about the other issue is how hard it is to adopt a child. So even people who are interested sometimes because of the paperwork and going through whatever the hoops are, sometimes families stop pursuing interest because adoption can be pretty hard.
Absolutely.
And Chrissy says, unfortunately, if there isn't political incentive for helping a foster child, then there isn't much interest from those in power. Absolutely.
Correct.
We have a couple minutes for more questions.
Sorry, my son is walking in the house right now and he's singing, so I apologize for any racket that you hear. He's here on fall break. I appreciate everybody's interest in this topic. I think it's something that, we don't know a lot about, and I didn't even know a lot about until I started digging. And I think it's just 20,000 per year, you guys. Like that's not that many. We just absolutely need to do better.
Well, it's looking like you have made all of our brains think really, really hard, so we don't have any more questions, but hopefully this is just the start of a conversation and we can do a follow-up. But if no one has questions, I guess you get 15 minutes of your day back.
That's right. And what the other thing I was going to say is regarding that Georgia investigation, I did see a follow-up on that because they started looking into it and putting it on the media, some wheels are starting to turn. So hopefully that situation will become better here in the near future.
Maybe that's our new call to action. Everybody can start asking these questions.
Alert the media. Right.
Use your social media powers for good.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time today and coming to listen to this important topic.
And I appreciate everybody coming out for the From Conference. And this was the session on Forgotten and Marginalized, Aging Out of Foster Care. And there will be a recording later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.